Hey everybody, we are Robert, Martin, and Francis, and this is Snakes and Otters, pointless discussion of eternal questions. Get ready, we're about to live in your head rent-free. Welcome back to Snakes and Otters. This is Code of Honor, our one of our favorite episodes where we get to share the sayings that we all like to try and live by or just think are great things to talk about.
I am Martin.
And I'm Robert.
And I'm Francis.
So today is my turn to be in the captain's chair for our Code of Honor. And as you know, listeners, if you've been listening for more than just a few episodes, you'll know that we take turns captaining the episodes, especially this one. We like to rotate it. But always, we have a particular format, and that is that one of my compatriots goes first, and then the other goes second, and I follow up with the hammer, as they like to say.
Yes.
And kind of try and tie it all together. And my quote, my saying is always picked, not always, but almost always picked on the fly. So I pick depending on what they have said. So, gentlemen, which one of you wants to go first today?
If it's all right with Francis, I think I'd like to kick us off, if that's all right.
Go right ahead.
All right, Martin. I think that's an excellent idea.
All right. So my quote is a follow-up to my last one, because you guys took me to task a little bit on my Oliver Wendell Holmes Sr. All right, Francis has a hand up there.
No. I was taking a drink of bourbon, sorry.
Okay. He was balancing himself, so he had bourbon in one hand and the other hand up. No. You guys took me to task a little bit with my autocrat of the breakfast table and Oliver Wendell Holmes and my controversy equalizes fools and the wise men in the same way and the fools know it. So you said, yeah, but what if the fools maybe unwittingly or wittingly telling a lie? You know, we have a responsibility about that, to challenge that. So the phrasing, I think it was Robert used, my head works a lot the same way that Francis's does, is you say certain words and then boing, something pops in there. So, Of course, what popped in there, just like with Francis, is Star Trek.
Oh, wow. Somebody else is going to do Star Trek. This is really cool.
So the pressure is off of Francis for today. You can take a break from the Star Trek. Not that you probably will, but you could.
Yeah. Well, if he's going to quote it, you know it's going to come out, but that's okay.
Yeah. So this is Picard, and this is a quote from, of course, my favorite storyline of Next Generation is the whole Worf, Sins of the Father reunion redemption storyline. And I think this one is in particular from Reunion. And the line is, your discommendation is a facade to protect less honorable men. It is a lie. Lies must be challenged. And listeners, if you haven't seen those episodes, you got to go watch them. But discommendation is a Klingon ritual of taking the honor away from a warrior. And Worf agrees to undertake discommendation to prevent the Empire from splitting in the Civil War. But that's what triggered, that whole discussion from last time triggers me to, yes, Picard's right. Lies must be challenged. So even though sometimes you've got to get in the hog wallow, honest, decent, moral people must challenge lies.
I love it.
I love it.
It's one of my favorite Picard quotes, too. And I'm not as enamored with those episodes as you are, Martin, only because I have so many others, but I do love them. But you're exactly right. Lies must be challenged. And whether they be, there's a similar quotation Picard makes with Wesley Crusher later in the episode, The First Duty. The first duty is to the truth, whether that be personal truth or professional truth or scientific truth, it's the same thing. You have a responsibility as a human being to seek the truth at all times, even when it's uncomfortable or inconvenient.
Yeah. I think especially when it's uncomfortable or inconvenient.
Exactly.
Because when it is, it means that there's something about us that either we are accepting or acknowledging or believing a lie. And that's what makes us uncomfortable. And so
Right.
that's why I think especially lies have to be challenged because, gosh, so much of what we have talked about these last several months has played well into what's been going on in the broader world. And I don't mean just the lockdown, I mean the social unrest. And I think what we're seeing in there is a lot of the lies being challenged. And
Absolutely.
not just in an individual way. We're starting to challenge it as a society, which is a fantastic thing. Individuals have to challenge it first, but it's a fantastic thing when society starts challenging the lies.
Especially when they were not recognized as such before. And I don't think it was because people were believing them. Apathy really plays a big part in when it comes to why lies persist. Probably
I think
more
that's exactly true.
Yeah, I think truly is. Once we recognize something as a lie, people of good faith will probably naturally try and challenge that. But it's when we don't see them or it doesn't hit in our personal backyards that they go along and people suffer. Because look at the great injustice that African Americans have suffered by the Confederate monuments. We talk a lot about that in recent episodes. Every time they look at them, they see a monument to white supremacy. And so many other people never noticed.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I don't know if we can be forgiven for that, but I do know that now that we have noticed, there's no forgiveness if we don't do something, because that would be so blatant and so deliberate. Martin?
Yeah.
Well, guys, too, I don't like to lose sight too much of, hey, I'm quoting a TV show here.
But a great one, though.
Yeah, but, I would understand the criticism of, hey, you're trying to take away a universal truth out of, a syndicated TV program, and a fun one. And I always
matters.
Yeah,
I really don't.
Yeah, I like to. We always like to give credit to the writers. We like to ascribe these lines, of course, to these characters and the actors, Patrick Stewart. But it was really the writers, and I'm not familiar who wrote Reunion, but it's probably Ron Moore, I would bet.
He would have been one of the showrunners at the time, so if he didn't write the episode, he was certainly involved with it.
Yeah.
And Ron D. Moore is absolutely cool. We love him a lot. We thank him for all that he did here and at Deep Space Nine and Battlestar Galactica and Outlander and so many other TV series that we all know.
Yeah.
He's one of those great fruitful individuals.
So I know for sure he was involved in the writing of Sins of the Father, which is kind of the prequel episode to this one. So I know they probably turned to him for this because, again, it's that whole story arc. So I want to kind of push back on that. I understand that criticism, so I would push back and say, well, you know what? That was kind of the point of these episodes. It was the writer's point to try to mine these universal things with these episodes, and transferring it to this set of alien characters in the Klingons, and in this exploration of what they're about, because they're supposed to be about honor. They're supposed to be about being honest and forthright and not deceptive. And here they are using deception and using a lie to prop themselves up. And here's humans who are famous for using lies to prop themselves up, challenging that. So it is an idealism. It is this idea that, in the future maybe humans will be better.
Well, it's
but that's a good idealism to have.
It is. It's a little bit of that tongue-in-cheek comment that I made a few episodes back about Star Trek being racist. Because of the way it handles species. Speciesist is really what I think we came down on the side of.
Yeah.
But, I think presenting those truths, and that is a truth, a capital T truth, that lies must be opposed, by putting that about the Klingons makes it far easier for us to digest and take in, I think. Because if we were saying it about ourselves, I think it comes off as far more preachy than it does when we talk about the Klingons. Yeah. It's still preachy if you're paying attention.
But it is about us.
But it is about us.
Yeah.
As long as it's kept universal, it's okay. Star Trek is bad when it's preachy in such a way where there is a legitimate disagreement on how something is done, and you try to say only this way is right or only this belief is right.
Well, I think
as you keep it universal, like this, telling the truth is the good thing to do all the time. Then who can argue with that if it's done with the right nuance?
Well, and the whole thing about lies must be opposed. Obviously, your quote was far more than that, but that's the gut. That's the money quote out of the quote.
Yeah.
And from a moral, a religious, and ethical aspect, it is so true because as we talked about on the show prep, because we don't do a whole lot of show prep before doing these particular shows, but we made the comment about. You are entitled to your own opinion. You're entitled to believe what you want on things that are truly matters of subjective matters. But when you're talking about things that are not, that are objectively true or false, you are not entitled to believe what is false. That's just not the way it works.
Sure.
Because you do harm.
Yes.
To not just the truth, you do harm to yourself, you do harm to those that hold the truth, which has to oppose your lie. The only difference between one and another is the degree. If your truth is that 2 + 2 = 5, and mine is 2 + 2 = 4, granted it's a fundamental thing, but in the grand scheme of things it doesn't matter. If your truth is that we can destroy this man's life to prop up our power, and my truth is no, you can't do that, your power doesn't deserve to endure, then obviously there's a much greater conflict.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of thing that it's only a matter of degree. If you can't hold the one because it's a lie, you can't hold the other because it's a bigger lie.
Yeah.
Or vice versa. If you can't hold the one because it's a bigger lie, it also means you can't hold the other one because it's a tiny lie. You do violence to the truth, to yourself, and those around you.
Yeah. Lies are corrosive.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. They eventually eat it away, as the story itself shows, because Worf's sacrifice in here is ultimately worthless because he gives up everything of himself and the Civil War still happens. And he goes through 2 years' worth of hell, personal hell, because of his choices in that episode that you could ultimately say need not have happened because the Civil War still happens and many people die and things eventually reach back to an equilibrium, but was it worth it?
You can make the argument that Worf, it's not so much that the Chancellor and Duras were wrong. Worf was wrong because he didn't oppose the lie.
Because he didn't oppose the lie, yeah. And he comes across as very much of a martyr and a hero is because of his selfless sacrifice. But in many respects, that's not the smart thing. Because this war was inevitable.
To him because he didn't live in Klingon society anyways. Right.
He was able to tolerate it.
Yeah.
Right.
But it was
because he knew he needed time.
He did, yes.
He needed the circumstances to be right. And Picard's just reminding him of that. Like, don't forget, we got to challenge this.
That's right.
I mean, Worf's mind, he's going, yep, I know, but the time's got to be right. I've got to find a way to get my honor back that works.
Yeah,
right.
He
makes for great drama, too, which, of course, from the story perspective, that's why it's done.
Yeah.
At the heart of this is an interpersonal conflict, it's not so much about the Empire as it is the interpersonal conflict. Yeah. But that interpersonal conflict and the lies that are involved in that are what have the greater impact on the Empire. Yeah. One of the things about lies, and this is obviously from a religious aspect, one of the reasons why Francis and I would say that you have to oppose lies is because of our own faith. Because as Catholics, we believe Christ when he said, I am the way, the truth, and the life.
Mm-hmm.
You believe he is truth, and we truly mean capital T there. There is nothing that is true that opposes him, and anything that is a lie opposes him. So
Mm-hmm.
from our perspective, not only is it unethical to not oppose a lie, it is immoral to not oppose a lie. And it is immoral to lie. So if your faith tells you that you can lie to non-believers, for instance, that's a very different understanding of God and faith than we would have.
Right.
And hopefully that's not something you would follow, but that's just an example of how that could be, how the faith aspect of that is different. And
well,
if
the
you're not a believer at all, then you can make the argument that the Pilate did what is truth.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Well, the conscience is primary in this too, because it's the barometer of whether of what you do with regard when you're faced with lies and truth, and how you have to go about this. And we recognize that truth sometimes can be complex, but ultimately there is a right solution. There has to be a right solution. Not always a perfect one, but
when we talk about conscience, though, we have to talk about a well-formed conscience.
I was about to do that, but please go right ahead, because we're on the same page with this. We know this. Yeah,
well,
you can't use your conscience as an excuse to do as you will.
Exactly.
Henry VIII tried that.
Right. Your conscience has to be well-formed, meaning it has to be able to recognize what is true. And you had made a comment earlier about personal truth. I don't like that phrase. I don't like that term, personal truth, because that implies that my truth is different than yours. My experience is different than yours. How I experience truth, how I understand truth may be different than yours. But the truth itself is independent of anybody. Otherwise, it's not truth. It's opinion.
I was quoting Jean Luc, actually. But
I know. But I mean, I want to point out.
I would agree. That's correct. It's
yeah.
facts of relativism, and
exactly.
Truth and relativism are opposed to each other. You can't really. It's a non sequitur
that's
from the beginning.
Personal truth, primacy of the conscience, without being well formed, is strictly moral relativism. There's no other way to put that.
Yeah. Conscience is a useful tool, but it has to be properly tuned in order for it to work.
Oh, very nice. Very nice.
Yeah, that's very nice. I like that. That's just kind of slid right into that one, but it works.
Yeah. Like I said, the writers of these shows, give them some credit. They're mining traditions, ethical traditions, and putting them in the mouths of a character as a palatable way to put them inside our brains.
Mm-hmm. Well, there's a reason the Next Generation is so revered even today, 30 years later, is because it was very good at that in a non-preachy manner. It would explored things. Yeah. It did not come down and try to say this way, that way. You're stupid if you do it this way. Only the true people do it this. It was never like that. It was always very good about let's explore the difficulties here, and then kind of come to some understanding of why something is good or not. And your quotation is a great example of that.
Yeah, when it did it well, it was very good at it.
Yeah, much better than Let That Be Your Last Battlefield.
Well, that's a low bar to set, though.
That's correct. That's right. We have pummeled that expired equine many episodes ago. Yes.
I don't know. I don't think that one can ever be pummeled enough.
I know it keeps coming back. It just
I mean, you can start with Jean Luc Picard, and then let's go to Immanuel Kant and Hegel and then Nietzsche, and we could go all down all sorts of philosophical rabbit holes when you start talking about the truth. And another thing too I think is important is you got to challenge the truth in all directions too. Or challenge the lies in every direction. You can't just pick and choose.
It's not so much challenge the truth as challenge the perception.
Yes.
Making sure that you understand what is true and what is a lie.
Yeah, gather your facts, know what you're talking about, and challenge the lies, but challenge them in every direction. Don't pick and choose.
Yep, and that's the problem with much of society today, is that nobody is willing to challenge in every direction anymore.
Yeah. It makes it hard to stand, and you lose all your friends. You know, you would lose your allies, challenge in every direction.
Yes, and because once you challenge your allies, you are no longer an ally. You are the enemy.
Yep.
You know what happens to enemies? They must be destroyed.
Yeah, everybody walks away from you, and then you're left with you're a voice in the wilderness that nobody wants to listen to.
So voice of one crying out in the wilderness.
Yeah. So what good does it do to challenge anything? Nobody's listening.
Create the paths.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. All right. So Francis, I think it's time to turn it over to you, man.
Yes.
Oh, well, thank you for that one. I'm going to go, you would think I would be the Star Trek guy, as we've said. I'm not this time. I'm not sure there's such a thing as too much Star Trek, but in this case, I'm going to go back to one of my heroes, one of our heroes, one of the guys that we love so very, very much, Ulysses S. Grant. We talked a lot about him in the last episode when we did Vicksburg, and we've done our own episode on him. But he is such an amazingly moral guy. He is truly one of the greatest people that ever, greatest geniuses in many ways, a compassionate man, a decent man, a good man, someone who wanted to do the right thing at all times. And he's full of great quotations, as you can imagine. But this one here is a little different. He's going to make, it's a very brief quotation. He's speaking about the concept of war in particular. I'm going to submit to you that this quotation applies in all sorts of circumstances, whether that be business or just life or wherever you want to take this. But I think this showed Grant's genius, and this is something I subscribe to very, very, very clearly. And I'll give you the quotation. It says, if men make war, or whatever endeavor you want to put there, if men make war in slavish obedience to rules, they will fail. If men make war in slavish obedience to rules, they will fail.
I was just going to say, I think we both we took a deep breath at the same time there.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
I like that to apply to areas outside of war for a lot of reasons. Grant obviously was not someone who believed in the rules of warfare. He believed in winning.
Right.
Because the sooner you win, the sooner you get it over with. The sooner you get it over with, the sooner that you can stop the killing. And that's a good attitude to have. If you've got to be in war, you want to get it over with as soon as possible. Ideally, with the least amount of casualties on both sides. That's not always possible. But that slavish devotion to rules. Obviously, the implication there is that not all rules are good. Some rules are, and some rules are not. Obviously, thou shalt not kill in the middle of a war is kind of hard to live by, for instance. But really, the command there is thou shalt not murder, not thou shalt not kill. There is a slight difference there, especially if you're the one being murdered. And but that slavish devotion to rules, you can make an argument that hits home for us Catholics, because we're full of rules. Mm-hmm. But we also change our rules an awful lot where they are man-made. And I would suggest that those are the kind of things he's talking about. Because that goes back to what is truth and what is lies.
It's exactly right. One of the reasons that I find this very, very telling, or so very, very dear to me in many respects, is he is recognizing the absolute power of the human capacity for creativity, yes, and for impetus, and for passion, and for efficiency, and for whatever talent that you might want to put in there. If all you're doing is slavishly obeying rules, you are not being human. And you are just an automaton that simply does what you are told, a blunt instrument, as someone might say. I think it was Ian Fleming. That's all you do. And that's anti-human, and it's also inefficient. That's what he's saying. You will never succeed if that's all you can do. It's only by being bold and being creative and deductive and inductive, using one's powers of reason as well as emotion and passion do, to create. It is ultimately a creative act, inspiration, or anything like that, even in war, which is what he's referring to in particular, but it applies in so many other things. You have to be able to act boldly, decisively, and confidently in truth. Now, there's tying these two things together. In truth, you have to be on the right side in order to succeed. And that's so telling, because we've all worked at places or known people who've worked at places who go in, punch the clock, and go home and never do anything but what they're told. And maybe that works for some people. But my God, why would we want to live that way? We're all better than that. Why wouldn't we want to contribute in a meaningful manner to whatever it is we do in life? Why wouldn't we want our lives to be to be fruitful? Almost in our
certainly, I think everyone would desire that, even if they don't realize it. I would recognize, though, that some people have lived lives that have made them incapable of doing anything else.
I understand.
Through no fault of their own.
Right.
Just as an example of how, now granted, this is an example of somebody that has overcome the life that he grew up in, but I'll use myself as the example here. I come from parents who grew up in eastern Kentucky, and the stereotype of the hillbilly from eastern Kentucky is not always that far off. It often is, but it's not always that far off. My parents are good people. They raised three of us, but they had their problems. Come from parents who were alcoholics. Pardon. Sorry, that's not the COVID. That's having dry throat there. I need to take a sip of bourbon to wet my whistle.
What kind of bourbon you got, bro?
Finishing off that glass of, because I poured a really big one earlier, of the Devil's Cut. It's got a nice burn, as we talked about, a little bit sooner than some of the more smooth ones, but it's got a nice kick that I enjoy every once in a while.
Sounds good.
I poured a fresh glass.
What are you boys drinking?
Fresh glass of Old Tub, and again, highly recommended. This is good stuff.
Yeah, same here. I've got a huge bottle of Old Tub, and I'm working my way through it. It'll be a little while. We need to get together, of course, so we finish our bottles quicker, so we can get to more variety. But this is new. This is the second or third episode I've done with this. It's really, really good. It's I think heavy, mature, a low burn and a slow burn. I'm really liking it.
Now, listeners, I'd also like to point out that even though we talk about bourbon all the time in our episodes, this is about the only time we actually drink bourbon. When we're together virtually or in person, recording episodes. So we are not luscious. I only bring that up because, as I was saying, I come from parents who were alcoholics. There was occasional domestic violence in my home. By all statistics and trends, I should be a far more horrible person than I am, live a far more horrible life than I do. I'm a casual drinker. You can take it or leave it. And I am not someone who beats my wife or my children. And I have bucked the trend. I have escaped from the life that statistically I should have. And so I recognize that not everybody can do that. So when we talk about how people who, why would they live that way where they only basically clock in and clock out every day? That's a hard thing not to, especially in this day and age when there are so many distractions that almost seem designed to keep us as someone who just clocks in and out every day, an obedient consumer of either media or product or services. I'm not normally a negative person about such things, but life has either intentionally or unintentionally structured itself in such a way that you get a lot of that. Part of that's a first world problem, granted.
Right, and I think that's the wisdom in Grant's quotation, is the fact that we don't ever forget you can be better than you are. And I think that's something we often forget because of so many distractions that we have here. Because your victory over your past came through your own, through God's grace, of course, but also through your own machinations as well. And
yes,
so
my desire not to live more of what I went through. I mean, I was not personally beaten or anything like that, but it's nearly as traumatic to witness the things.
Absolutely. Absolutely, and as the adult child of an alcoholic myself, I can tell you, so much of the good things that we are today is in reaction to the bad things that we witnessed growing up. That's part of the human condition. Family of origin is huge for so much of what we are. But it also gives me great hope in the fact that we have the ability to be better than what we, by statistics, as you would say, can be.
Because we are human beings, not just human doings. And that being
I like that.
is part and parcel of using that intellect and will, that being made in the image and likeness of God. That's what that's about, the intellect and the will. We're the only creatures that have intellect. And the will to use it in a way other than animal instinct and animal reaction.
So many people, that's all they want. That's all they do. So many people, that's all they want, and that's all they do.
Right. And that's not necessarily horrible.
No.
But it's horrible only in the sense that we could be more, so why wouldn't you want to? If
that's right, that lost potential. Martin, you had something.
And it's important, I've always felt that's one of those lies that's out there, is you are the sum of your history. And you're not.
That's correct.
You can be something else. Your future is, your destiny is not set. It's not wired. That's a lie to challenge.
That's right.
I would phrase it this way. I think that where we are today is the sum of the decisions we have made.
Yes.
So you could make part of that the sum of your history, but more importantly, your destiny is not the sum of your history.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
That's
you are not a prisoner of not only of your upbringing, but of the decisions you made either. As Catholics, we believe in the power of redemption, constant new beginnings over and over and over again. That's a beautiful thing. Yeah. To be able to do that in life. So many people have that opportunity. Everyone has that opportunity. Yeah. So many don't take it. And there's a tragedy. And they don't, exactly. They don't understand it. They don't understand that. But that should be a universal truth. That should be one of those. Those lies. That's exactly. That's one of those lies that must be challenged. Is that you are a prisoner, Martin, as you were saying. That is a lie. You are a prisoner of your decisions or of your past, whether they are your fault or someone else's fault or nobody's fault.
I mean, that just seems to be one of those things that's in the universal mindset now. Is everybody's a prisoner of their circumstance, and this future is set. If your folks did this and you grew up here, and policy and so many things are set with this idea in mind that everybody's future and everybody's destiny is this set product of where they were.
God, how hopeless a life would that be?
And yeah, exactly. That's so hopeless. It's like, no, that's a lie. It's challenged. This podcast stands testament to challenging that lie. I mean, here we all are, all three of us, very humble beginnings. We're not the children of philosophers. We're not from a long line of distinguished scholars. My dad dropped out of school at 9th grade, and like your guys talking about your backgrounds and alcoholism and violence and these things like. But you can change. Your future is not set. Your destiny is not locked in because of this incident in your past. It can all be different. That's a lie. Challenge it. Be different. Be great. It can happen.
Requires courage and requires deliberate action, but it is possible.
Action, yes.
And people notice. One of the things that is one of those lies is that, especially those who are slavishly devoted to
To
rules.
the rules, yeah.
They think that you can't change and that you shouldn't change. But when
that there's no point to changing.
And that there's no point to changing.
Yeah, well, change is bad. Yeah.
But people notice. A couple of years ago, when my sister came down here, it was right after we bought the house we're in, which is our first home. We were talking, and my sister made a comment about the things I do as a dad. That she's, where did you learn? She's not a quote, but the sense was, where did you learn to do that? Because our dad didn't do that stuff. Maybe part of that's being exposed to the idealized families of Leave It to Beaver and things like that. I don't know, but it was different. It was definitely different than how it was brought up. But for me, it just seemed to be the natural way to do it. So either I got extremely lucky, or as Francis said, was extremely blessed, which I believe both are probably true, because they're not incompatible concepts. Sometimes blessing and luck go hand in hand.
Yeah, because it is two things. It's two pieces of everything. It's that will, that making that decision, and then acting on the decision. So it's will plus action.
Yeah, the only way to change
that is the intellect and will that I talked about being made in the image and likeness of God. Because intellect, in this case, is making the decision. That's the mental aspect of it. And the will, and the way I'm using it, is the action itself. So it's the same thing, just a different way of phrasing it. So,
yeah.
Wow. That is deep, fellas.
Pretty amazing, isn't it? And Robert, we haven't heard your quotation yet.
That's right. We haven't even heard mine yet. So
sorry to set you up for such a difficult hammer, but you've never let us down yet.
I mean, the bar is set pretty high today.
Yeah, I mean, we're already hitting all kinds of, Aristotelian and Hegelian and who knows what else. I don't even know.
We're pushing back against John Stuart Mill once again, which he's the guy that I think
we're going to start doing episodes on philosophers or something.
We're doing Nietzsche very soon. That's going to be one of our history episodes.
Not necessarily his hero, just as an
not at all. Just he's an important person. We're going to do von Clausewitz. We're going to do one on him. But you're absolutely right. We need to do one on. We got. Listeners, we got probably the next year planned out, but we're constantly flexible, and we bump things all the time. So I think we can easily go deep. I really would like to do a John Stuart Mill episode because I want to shoot arrows into him. I had a philosophy professor when I was getting my master's degree that was talked about Kant, and he said the world would be in a better place if Kant had been stillborn, which of course got everybody's attention very quickly.
Yeah. But your master's was done at St. Meinrad. So.
That's correct. That's
the categorical imperative.
Exactly, that's correct. And it was there was a lot of things that happened with regards to that. There's a lot of things we can talk about that because if we understand philosophy, we understand the human condition. And I think too many people get bogged down in, that's so hard. No, it's not. It's really not. And we at Snakes and Otters specialize in making the incomprehensible perfectly comprehensible when we're on our game.
Maybe not perfectly, but it's close
enough. When we're on our game.
When we're on our game, I did qualify. When we're on our game, we have the ability.
We got to be on our game. Yeah.
But we usually are when it comes to that. So just keep watching this space, folks. You'll be seeing a lot more about. We've got some ideas. We've always got ideas.
At heart, we talk about how we are nerds and armchair historians and what have you, but I think at heart we are philosophers more than anything else because
you're exactly right.
We bring that to everything.
Everything.
Even we do our silly pop culture stuff, it still finds its way in. I mean, after all, the tagline of this show is pointless discussion of eternal questions.
That's right.
Come on.
Thank you, Robert.
That's what we are.
Well done, sir.
But we need your quotation. Yes.
My quotes. As I said before, I almost never pick my quote ahead of time. I have a pretty long list of things that are just quotes that I like, things that it's like, I can agree with that, or things like, that's really profound. So this one is an anonymous source. Where I got this from did not have a source for it. So it's probably something that person had heard and just put in the list, and they didn't know who to attribute it to. So if anyone knows, you can certainly feel free to email us or send us a tweet or whatever and let us know that the source of this. So the quote is, "Your problem isn't the problem. Your reaction is the problem." So,
I like that. Yes.
Yes.
This, I think, does a great job of tying us, because we already talked about reaction. And so, and I picked this quote before then, but I did a mental yes when we were talking about reaction a little while ago. And excuse me, taking a sip of the bourbon. And to me, this is all about the intellect and the will and the exercise of it. Because, yeah, there are certainly problems. Some problems are small, some problems are large. Far too often, we treat every problem as life-shattering, and not every problem is. And far too often, problems that are life-shattering, we don't treat as a problem, period, much less as a small one. And so the reaction really is where the problem can be. It's not always that, because this is probably something somebody said to another person who was in the wrong. But how we react to anything is really going to display who we are. It's going to display what we believe, what our values are, what we hold to be most important, and who we hold to be most important. Because it's literally every interaction we have. That's every thought we have. There is really, dreams aside, because even those have an origin somewhere, everything we say, do, and think is a reaction to something else that we have seen, heard, said, done, or thought.
Well, for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. That's a Newtonian truism, but it applies universally, yeah.
But the problem is it's not always equal and opposite.
Well, that's correct. That's right. Right. A measured response so often doesn't happen.
Yeah, that was my whole point about sometimes we make mountains out of molehills and molehills out of mountains, basically. And so that reaction, we brought up being that slavishly devoted to rules is a sure path to failure, basically. And that is also part and parcel of that concept of we must oppose lies, precisely because they are lies. And when we don't, when we are slavish to rules without criticism or without critical thinking, to put it better.
Yeah, there's the words. There's the magic words we've been dancing around.
And when we do not challenge the lies in all directions, even if it's uncomfortable, and especially, that's when our reaction is the problem. It really is. And it can be so small, because it can be as simple as being short and snippy with your kids when they come up and want to talk to you while you're in the middle of trying to relax watching a television show. And I know none of us have ever had that happen.
Oh, no, of course not. Of course not.
Yes. Yeah. But it can be something as simple as that, but, that's demeaning, and it's hard not to do. And if we can do that with our family, my God, what do we do with, the waiter or waitress that spills our drink? Or just takes 5 extra minutes to get our food to us, when the people behind us got their food first, even though they came in after us, things like that. Mm-hmm. These reactions, they're all important, because the reaction, I'm not so much worried about the thought reaction, what thought I have in response to the thoughts prior to that, or what I see. I think our biggest problem is the reactions that are to and with one another.
Yeah, the interactions that we have as a result of our initial reactions. Because reactions is something we have 100% control over. Now, not our feelings, we do not. But how we act upon them, which is what you're saying, the reactions, we have 100% control on it. One of the things that we hear about when people talk about how you select a life partner, a mate, somebody to marry, is in the dating universe, you say, how does this potential person treat the waiter or waitress that you're around? That's a great example. Or treat other people. How do you want to be treated by them? That will show how they are.
How do they make you feel?
That's exactly right. And
which, I'm not one for using feelings as a guide, but in this case, yeah, because if you're always feeling bad when you're around that person, that's probably not a person you should be around.
The fingerprints are always there. They're always left behind as to a person's nature. Now, there are exceptions, of course, because certain psychopaths have the ability to mask certain things. But as a general rule, though, most people aren't that sophisticated, fortunately.
Martin?
Martin?
Well, just, it ties right back to my original... it's one thing to burn down the shit house. It's another to install plumbing.
Well, that's correct.
Yeah.
That speaks to the quality of your reaction matters, and there's not a lot of virtue to be found in burning down the outhouse. And for some people, that's their first reaction, is to get angry and to lash out at whoever's nearby, and that serves no one. Serves no one. It really doesn't.
It feels good.
Yes. Well, it does.
How very selfish. How very selfish. That's right.
That's part of the problem, because sin, not that all bad reactions are sinful, but at its core, when you think about something that is wrong or that we shouldn't do for whatever reason, even if it's not the level of mortal sin, it's because it makes us feel good in one way or another. Whether it's we feel better than somebody else because they're more miserable than us, or literally it's more pleasurable in our physical senses. In some way or another, we get something out of it.
The domestic abuser.
Yes.
There's a perfect textbook, casebook example of how they become the way they are, is because the reaction that they gives them validation, pleasure, some form of dopamine hit, to use the biology of it.
Or they can exercise power over somebody who has less power than them, just as someone has exercised power over them.
So often the case. That's correct.
Yeah. One of the things, the more I think about this quote, and again, this is, your problem isn't the problem, your reaction is the problem. The more and more I think about this, I think this is one of the best two-sentence summaries of both philosophy and moral theology that you can come up with. Because philosophy is all about the human condition. Moral theology is all about doing the right thing in the human condition. And the right thing, granted, has a very broad definition, because it's not just towards one another, it's towards God as well. So the right thing is broader for moral theology than it is for philosophy. But you really got to have an understanding of both, I think, to really be a well-rounded person, even if it's not a formal understanding of both. Because there's plenty of people that grasp this stuff intuitively, but wouldn't think of themselves as moral theologians, much less philosophers.
Well, truths are supposed to be self-evident.
Supposed to be.
Yeah, supposed to be. If we have the will to look for them. And if we can keep ourselves from being overly distracted, I think there's part of the problem. I don't think there's very few people that can't can't swim in these waters if they should so choose. They just say, well, that's just not for me. I think they do that a disservice to themselves. I think there's a lot to be learned in these areas. But that's why we have snakes and otters, gentlemen, to be able to plumb these depths for them.
I want an exception noted.
Yeah.
To this idea. If you won't get out of the left lane on the expressway, that's a problem, regardless of my reaction.
Well, this is true. I mean, we're not saying that there are not problems, and they're not. It's
guys, on a serious note, that's. Yeah, you made me think that I need to do better. Because I am sometimes the angry. I'm the angry fellow, but yes, we're all fallen creatures. That is something I always try to remember.
That's not to give us an excuse. That just gives us a reason to do better.
It's a reason to do better.
That's right.
Recognizing our fallen natures isn't recognizing that we are inherently evil, because we are not Calvinists.
No, we don't believe that.
Francis and I don't think Martin would agree that we are inherently corrupt as human beings. But recognizing that fallen nature, that concupiscence, which is that tendency to sin, to do the wrong thing when confronted with a choice between what is right and wrong, is just recognizing the point from which we're starting.
Mm-hmm.
That's right. One of the hardest things to do when we undertake anything, whether it's something big or something small, but especially when there's a personal element to it, and that is recognizing our reality, not what we want it to be, but what it really is. And that includes who we are, our capabilities, and where we're starting from. But also not just our capabilities, but also our proclivities, meaning not just what the good we want to do, but also the evil, for lack of a better word, that we want to do. Even if St. Paul can say, even though I do not want to do evil, I do it. I do the things I do not want to do. And he's considered the greatest evangelizer of Christianity. And if he can say that, then surely the rest of us can be humble enough to recognize that is the same is true, because that's the reaction.
Right. We don't live up to our ideals all the time.
Right.
Doesn't mean the ideals... Yeah, that's right. I mean, doesn't mean we're repudiating the ideals.
And it doesn't mean we throw them out.
That's right.
Because we can't live up to them.
Remove the goalposts, as they say.
Right.
Just redefine them so it's not a problem anymore. That's common these days. We recognize that's a cheat. And that's, again, lies must be challenged. And that's what that would be. That's right.
Well, moving the goalpost happens both ways. Sometimes it's good. Sometimes it's good to move them in closer because it gives you a win. But the thing is, you then move them back farther out so you have something new to shoot for. Sometimes it's good to move them farther out to set the bar a little higher, to give us something more to shoot for. What's not good is when you are having trouble hitting the goal from, say, 30 yards, is moving it an extra 20 yards away, because then the goal becomes impossible. And that's a problem, because the reaction is then, well, I can't do that. If I couldn't hit 30, I'm not going to hit it from 50, so I might as well give up.
Yeah.
And that, I think, is probably the biggest problem, biggest reaction that is a problem, is we give up on ourselves, and we give up on other people. Some people give up on other people before they even start.
Yeah.
Courage requires persistence, gentlemen.
Yes.
That's for sure.
It requires persistence, and also requires knowing when to try something else. Because sometimes...
Because you don't want to be slavishly adhering, obedient to
the rules.
That's right. Yeah. You have to know where you need to be going.
Well, and that's the whole thing. The destination is the point. Not... I want to say the journey is not, because the journey is essential, because until we get to either heaven or hell, we're not going to get our ultimate destination, right?
Yeah.
Speaking from the grand religious sense. But for those of us that believe in an afterlife, that should be the most important thing that we shoot for. And from that should flow everything else. That should be why, at a very minimum, that we live a good and moral life. Not because we're scared of going to hell, although that's not the worst reason to be good.
No.
Obviously the better reason is so that you get to heaven. Something you shoot for instead of avoiding. But
so there's a little Rousseau there. There's a little social contract theory right in there.
Yeah.
So. Do we need to be teaching a college course here or something, guys?
I thought that's what we were doing already. That's right. Snakes and Otters should be mandatory on college camp high, because it really makes a very good a good way to it keeps. Hey, we keep our game sharp. So hopefully we're doing.
Zig Ziglar would call this back in the day would have been called Automobile University, because you would play tapes and personal development programs. Your tape player, your CD player, and then your iPod, and then your phone in your car. Or nowadays, a flash drive that's connected to your car.
We need to offer, approach Bellarmine and say, hey, we need to be on staff here. We need to be on the faculty. Bjorn loved that, wouldn't he?
Oh, that would be awesome.
Yeah. So we're going to be on campus and Snakes and Otters 101.
Can you imagine if the three of us got tenure at Bellarmine?
Look out, world, here we come.
Oh,
That'd
my
be
gosh.
something else. All right. Well, that's pretty good stuff, man. I mean, we were everywhere there.
We usually are. Code of Honors, never lets us down.
Yeah.
We always.
I don't know that I was terribly profound with tying it together, but I still tied it together.
Yeah,
It
was great. It was great.
works.
I mean, because again, you're taking threads from everywhere. We're taking all these different threads and synthesizing a moral philosophy in a 1-hour podcast.
Right. Yeah, well, making a cogent and coherent discussion out of certain pieces. Yeah.
Yeah.
We go back to those universal truths. We always do. That's why they're universal, for goodness sakes.
Yeah. Exactly. It just goes to show you that there is universal truth, that there is a set of ideals that is common to everybody.
Yeah.
And I think what makes our show good, I don't like to spend too much time patting ourselves on the back, but I think that's our strength.
Yeah.
Is being able to
Amen.
take these fun topics and tie that together. Now, there may not be a whole lot of listeners that like all of the stuff we do, but I think we do enough that we appeal to a pretty broad range, and we still hit this kind of stuff most every episode.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
No matter what we decide to talk about.
That's
Francis,
right.
brother, what is next?
Speaking of next episodes, right? Two words, gentlemen. Ronaldus Maximus.
Whoa.
We're talking about. I'm not sure why it took us so long to get here, but next episode is a Heroes episode, and we're going to talk about Ronaldus Maximus himself, the formative president of our young life, because when we were in high school and college was during the 80s. So of course, Ronald Reagan was very formative to us, the world that we lived in and inhabited, and he was a giant of a person. As well as a president. He's known as the great communicator for lots of good reasons, and whether you were on his side politically or not, you certainly could not help but be in awe of his ability to connect with people. And we're going to talk a little bit about that, about what's so great about him and what were his virtues and strengths. We're going to recognize he's not a perfect person. No one is. But there are certain good things that we can glean from him. And we'll talk about those next episode. Don't miss it.
Now, if we had a huge following, that would be a very controversial episode in this day and age.
Ronald Reagan.
Thanks for being with us here every week at Snakes and Otters, a pointless discussion of eternal questions. Be sure to spread the word on your social media accounts. Follow us and retweet us. We are on Instagram and on Twitter at Snakes and Otters.
Let your friends know that they can find us on Podbean, Spotify, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, and on YouTube. Just search Snakes and Otters Podcast to find us, and please remember to leave us your comments and reviews. It helps people find us.
And you can always send us an email at snakesandotterspodcast@gmail.com.
I'm Martin.
I'm Robert.
And I'm Francis. Catch us next week, same snake time, same otter channel.